Welcome to IB Unplugged, a Cognity podcast for IBDP educators that tackles your submitted questions and challenges by connecting you with experts and peers who share their ideas and stories from real classrooms.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of IB Unplugged, where John and I are coming from Johannesburg, South Africa, attending the African Education Festival. So John and I have been super excited about this festival where we've been able to see some fantastic plenary sessions, see some great workshops, really learn from the community here, get a lot of new ideas for other topics that we want to be doing in the future, and hopefully meeting some future guests that we'll see later. But we've also been able to meet with some incredible people here, one of which is Elizabeth Imende. Elizabeth is the Executive Director of the Association of International Schools in Africa, and we got to meet her and really had so many ideas to talk about, like how associations can work with schools and teachers and really evolve with professional learning and really all of the great work that she's been able to do here. And we said, let's do an episode.
Let's do an episode, yeah, because we want to talk about, what's the value of associations and why is it good when schools join associations, learn a little bit more, and essentially build as a community to tackle different problems that are, in their context-specific areas, or even just look for ways to develop professionally that might not, include just moving up the hierarchy at your school, but ways that you can impact other schools as well. So everything from, what's important about being in an association to the professional learning opportunities, the leadership that comes from this. So we've got all sorts of things we want to talk about with Elizabeth, and we really hope you enjoy this episode where we talk about associations, why that's a useful thing for IB schools to be a part of.
Yeah, so let's get started. Let's bring in Elizabeth.
Well, Elizabeth, welcome to IB Unplugged. We're so excited that you joined us and are willing to talk with us a little bit about how we can build community through professional learning and, of course, professional learning communities and that sort of thing. So we're super excited that you're here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we always like to kind of warm up a little bit, and we know that you've worked across so many different regions, lots of different systems. We were interested, what's taught you about the power of learning from others?
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, I think one advantage to working across, of course, I've been in the U.S. public school system, the international school system. I've taught IB in Germany early in my career, public schools in the U.S., and then I'm a product of African international schools and wonderfully got to come full circle with that. And I think what's been consistent is that, education is so is wonderfully complex, and because of that, there is no way to sort of go it alone. You can have, and there's no silver bullets. There's no one curriculum that's going to work surefire every time. It's so complex that it has to be approached systemically, and there's no way to go about it except collaboratively. You need all the best minds, all minds on deck, all hearts on deck. Mm-hmm. So it's been, there are professions where you actually can go solo because it's you and but education is not one of them. And so it's been, I think, wonderful in every community I've been a part of, seeing how the community views the task ahead, understands how important it is to get these students, to where we want them to be, and then commits to working together, to working through the challenges. And we're all going to align ourselves around this mission that's bigger than all of us and better than all of us, and how that brings out the best in people, because they're all wanting to put their best on the table. So,
I love this. Honestly, I'm all about it, because education isn't in isolation.
No, it can't be.
It has to involve all of us. And I love that you said, not just minds, but hearts. Want to get everybody's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that. The mission alignment, I think, is so core. And I think that one piece of that is also at which level you think about your education community. And I was wondering if we could talk about, for you personally, what does a community really mean for you in education?
I love that question, because community is a word we all throw around, and don't throw around, actually, that we understand is what we're joining, what we want to be a part of. I think personally, community has to start with, starts outside of school with the people that you realize you need to, who you can be vulnerable with, maybe even outside of the professional setting, and who you kind of intentionally stay in touch with as part of your own self-care, especially, at all levels. I think we're all leaders, whether you're head of school or teacher, we're leading this. And so that's part of self-care, but then also, and always realizing that there's two-way commitment when you're talking about community. So what am I gaining and very intentionally and gratefully from this community? And what am I giving very intentionally and generously to the community. And then the school community. School communities are interesting because they are, you're there to get I don't want to say product or service. You're there to get an education, and parents and depending on the school, you're tuition paying or you're not, but you're there for that. But you realize you have to work together, and in ways that are respectful and open and honest in order for that to happen, to create the environment for learning to happen. So, I think, anytime people are together and they know that there's a common purpose or something they're trying to make happen, and what are they willing to give up and give in order to do that functionally and sustainably. Yeah.
That shared responsibility that comes into that too then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. All right. Well, I guess then our final sort of warm-up question before we get to the meat of this. I wonder if there's a moment or a story you remember where collaborating with some other educators really changed or shifted your thinking.
Oh my goodness. It's like every day. But well, I'll go back to, I think, recent history where when COVID hit all of us in schools and there was no blueprint, in a lot of other challenges, it's like, oh, let's go to so-and-so who's a thought leader on, assessment or curriculum design or on, student support or MTSS. We suddenly all had no script. And so it was, we were creating it. We were everyone was sort of understanding it live. And so in that setting, I remember valuing my school leadership team more than ever because I was like, wow, this is, it takes courage to keep showing up and going, no one is here to do it for us. It's us,
right, Right.
And so bringing our best thinking and this combination of, commitment, humility, but, yes, we don't know what the landscape is, but we have to show up and make decisions and do things with some level of certainty in order to, serve the community. So my immediate school leadership team, but also it was amazing what that did for the global education community. People were so generous, and other times there might have been a sense of competition or, we're keeping our trade secrets, but suddenly it was like, everyone was like, look, we just did this, you want it, how can we make it better? It was really actually a really beautiful time within the international and global education community.
It's so nice to have somebody describe COVID as a beautiful time within the international education.
Yes.
So often we talk about, it was just this massive disruption, and it was, but if I link the things you said so far, that responsibility, that humility, I'm also bringing something to the table. It's this shared endeavor that said, here's a collective problem where we've got some experiences that will allow us to deal with this, but we haven't experienced this before. And so we've got to value what everybody else bringing to the table. I think that cuts right to the heart of what we want to talk about. So,
great.
Yeah.
All right. So for our first segment, we really want to talk about the power of associations in education. And I know that at AISA, you guys have done so much work for really building the community, like we were talking about before, and really being able to learn from each other. And so as a general intro question about this, could you describe what role associations like AISA play in supporting schools and educators?
Well, let me go back. So when your initial question made me think of an African proverb. This might be not be the only time it comes to mind, but there's a proverb that says a bundle of sticks is not easily broken. So, you can break one stick, but put together a bundle, it's much harder. And so that to me maybe is the best analogy or visual for associations came into existence initially because, well, I'll speak about Africa. Africa is such a vast continent, and you had these schools that came into being to serve the international community and to serve the local community, but they were, you might have one school and the next school is 2 days drive away, and the next, unlike when I was back in the U.S. and you had schools,
right next door.
Yes. So that idea of they came into existence just to connect the international school community because inevitably we will go through things that could threaten to break us, geopolitical instability or currency changes or what, things that are, on the outside and then internally within our own communities. And so just this idea that if we're together and we're bundled in an association and you're sharing those things and none of us is walking alone, then we're less likely to be broken by whatever challenges, and broken literally in the sense of enrollment dipping and our school existential threats,
sure,
but also just mental and emotional and, things that weather a community. And if you have a place where you can share those in an association that understands them, because we're all in the same local context, then, it's an investment in your own sustainability. So I would say that the associations, that's one main. I'm sure we'll get into more about in terms of continuous improvement and the actual school stuff.
Well, yeah, because I very much appreciate the kind of resiliency aspect of it. Like here's another school and they're going through the same thing and we can kind of empathize together. And tell me more. I think there's more with that, like association from like what happens within schools and teachers and how they can get better by having that professional community, right?
Absolutely. So again, all our schools are quite complex systems. And so one of the things AISA does is think, okay, how can we support a school by supporting every level of the system? So we look at, obviously the teaching and learning, which is the core, the business of the business, and how do we support teachers so that they can do what they do at the level of excellence they do it and feel sustained and nourished professionally. So that is where we, the start, that's the core. And how do we do that? We bring, we acknowledge the complexity of teaching and try to bring resources and capacity building that acknowledges the complexity of the practice and, how do we resource teachers? So that's one thing. And we do that by, bringing in, thought leaders from our own profession and written resources, but also connecting teachers to one another. That's a huge role that we play. And I'll just get practical here. We have practice groups in AISA. So you can join, a practice group of elementary school principals. You can join a practice group of counselors, student support, personnel, business managers.
Teachers.
Yes. And so that way you have each other, in between. We do a lot of events throughout the year because the in-person interactions are really powerful. So we have maybe 8 events during the year, including our flagship annual conference. So our time for our community to come together and learn in person. But in between that, the practice groups are who I can call on a Wednesday afternoon if I'm dealing with something that I'm like, I have no idea. And you've got someone, that you've met, that's in your region, that you have a relationship with, and not just one person, but a group of people who will understand, help you think through that issue.
You can see how powerful that can be, especially if you're like the only teacher of that subject at your school, right? We have, I don't know, psychology, but I'm the only one here. And for example, when it comes to, IAs or something like this, I really love somebody else to moderate with me. And, so you can see where that professional community then makes a massive difference. Right?
Absolutely. Yes, exactly.
How do you think that being part of these associations and being these groups can differ from the more traditional professional development and professional learning programs that you could do as an individual or an individual school?
Yeah, so I think, I'm going back to my experience as a teacher where I was always, voracious, learner and consumer of professional learning. And I worked in schools that were very generous with professional learning budgets. So I was always, it's like, I can go to this conference, I could take this online course, but each of those, and they were excellent, in terms of content, but I was doing it with a different group every time. And so it was about the content and not necessarily the group because they were temporary. It was like, so I was kind of on my own and building my own capacity and understanding, but on that kind of solo path with the content. Associations, I think the power of them is that our community knows one another and they're going to meet each other. So we have virtual workshops that run all year long and they see each other in the virtual workshops and then they see each other at the tech summit and they see each other at conference. Then they're in the same practice group. So suddenly, the people are as rich a source of professional learning as any content will ever provide. Right. And to me, there's a dynamism in because you're consuming professional learning, then you're applying it in your context, and there's a learning that comes from that's almost like richer than what you receive, and then you're then sharing it with your colleague.
It's like a case study that this happened here, and here's how,
Exactly.
So that's the power of the same community, and that you're consuming, but you're feeding it back, and that just makes the whole region and all of us so much stronger.
That's so, because I think there's something that there's been so much study on the idea with professional learning. If you go and do one session and then you go back to your classroom, like that's not enough. You really need to be in this kind of, it takes a certain amount of time and a certain amount of revisiting of professional learning for it to stick.
Yes.
But like you said, that just puts it in isolation of you as the teacher and consuming the professional development, but how much power there is. And I'm sure there's so much impact in revisiting professional learning with the same other people. Because if you go to an IB conference or something like that, you'll meet amazing people in workshops and learn from everyone there. But then there isn't the follow up on that piece too. And as a part I haven't thought about, and I think that's really interesting.
Which then I guess leads to the idea that I think schools have to be adaptable. They have to change with the times and things have to adjust. And so I'm wondering, what sort of role then do associations play, or how are they kind of uniquely positioned, I guess, to help drive change across multiple schools so that we can adapt to things like COVID, like you were talking about before, or right now, AI and some of the things that are challenging almost all of us. What's that sort of unique position of the association that helps to drive that?
One of the things is we then have this history, right? I mean, AISA's been around for 60 years. And again, schools have been a part of this, part of the association for many of them for decades. And so what that, and so we've weathered a lot of storms. So you have that history. So when something new comes along, it's like, well, we know what we do when, we're not destabilized. We have a history of things happening that are difficult and we're devastating, and we pull together as a community, and we learn and we support each other, and we stay committed to our own learning and growth into one another. And so that, I think, even with this AI thing, again, this is a good example where we know it's a good positive thing and it has potential, but there's a lot of uncertainty and fear in it too. And so I think, but we have this habit of that we've built together of showing up, with commitment to our own learning, with openness, with integrity, with a desire to understand what we're facing, and then our community, and how do we integrate it or grow into it in a way that's that best serves our community. So I think you just develop this habit of being and responding to change together that enables you to do it well, no matter what comes.
Showing up professionally, giving your best, willing to learn what's happening, and then working together in that.
Yeah, and that's actually been a really inspiring thing, I think, to watch is, again, the relationship piece. In our practice groups, there's something about, when you see, you could be pretty awesome as a school and doing well, but then you show up to this group of schools and you see how their commitment and how they are processing the professional learning, being committed to taking that learning, applying it, coming back the next time you talk and being like, this is how it went. Somehow it just raises the bar. So you all, this from teaching. It's like if you create this culture in your classroom, then a new student comes in, they could be from a whole other, and they're like, oh, I guess this is how it's done around here, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that's true in the associations. It's like new teachers come from or a new school joins, and they're just like, whoa, I'm going to up my game. Like clearly this is just, there's a standard. We're not even talking about it, but it's just how we show up and how we do things that inspires other people to, be better.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that makes so much sense because it's the same thing within teachers in a school. It's such a big reading the room when you're a new teacher in a school. Like, how do people do things around here? And you want to match what's happening there, either for good, hopefully, or for bad. But a bit more, I want to dive more into this kind of community piece. And I think these practice groups are a fantastic example of it. But for you, what are some of the best ways that you see collaboration amongst the different schools?
Sure. Well, so one of the things that we've tried to, as an association, is say one of the ways you stabilize schools and communities is making sure things are codified that are excellent, and so that they're accessible when people come and go. There's something. So one of the things happening right now actually is that AISA created the Child Protection Handbook that's used globally, and we created it for our region association, but it's now used globally. And so this is the 10th year, and so there's been a 10th year edition. We thought, okay, let's revisit. There's probably new, there's definitely new research and new things. So we thought it would just be kind of a easy little upgrade and editing. And now it has more than 30 new chapters, because in 10 years, there's, all this learning that people were so excited to contribute. And so that'll come out. There's a group of educators from across our region. There's so much good happening in terms of enhancing student support in our schools. And it's something our schools are all really committed to, but the how has been challenging, and schools that are at different levels of implementing more robust supports for neurodiverse students. So there's a group of educators in our region that are like, well, let's collect that, because we're all talking about it in all these events and virtual workshops, but let's collect that in a student support handbook that can be used regionally. There's a small schools guide coming out for small schools because they have unique needs where they wear so many hats and different things that make them sometimes a little more susceptible to change or difficulties. And so a group of small school heads have helped us, and it's been a 2-year project, come up with this small schools guide that now new heads in the region that are new to headship or new to small schools aren't starting from scratch. So I think that's one of the more powerful examples of schools in our association saying, like, let's get this down in a way that outlives us and outlives, and that helps whoever comes in next won't have it as hard as we do, or won't be figuring out from scratch, so that they can start from a higher place and, make it better. Yeah. So that's, I think, one of the more powerful.
It's massively powerful. You can see how that then engages everybody in the community, and it kind of brings these voices in, brings in the research that you might have been doing, the different case studies that people might have to help contribute to that. And you can see where that really kind of moves beyond, like, you have the flagship event that you were talking about. There's kind of the networking opportunity there, but then it kind of moves from there into like the genuine, more impactful relationships themselves. Is that something that is mainly happening through the association, you feel, or is that kind of facilitated more in the association that schools and teachers can then be a part of and then have more of that impactful practice?
Yeah, I think so, because again, any individual teacher in a school, they can be doing wonderful, awesome things for their students or for their school. Suddenly, these teachers and leaders think, I can contribute to something, a handbook or a course or module that will have impact across the continent. It's just about this, taking who you are and what you have and investing it, in a place and in a way that's going to have even broader and longer lasting impact. And the associations can provide that. You can give in a way that will impact a teacher and students that you'll never meet, So that's, I think, a unique thing, a unique advantage that we have and that we can offer teachers, and that they can see, I think, the professionalization of education, where you're impactful in the classroom, but you're also impactful. There are teachers who are like, I love teaching. I don't want to be a teacher, principal, middle school, head of school. Right. That's not how they see success or growth, but they love, then the association that offers them a way to contribute beyond their classroom or school in a different way than just being an administrator. It's, so it's, I think, something that teachers appreciate that we offer them.
I keep coming back to that analogy at the start, that sort of one stick and then multiple sticks together, and you see how that builds that stronger community, and then almost as a community, we're moving forward. As a whole community. It's not everybody's kind of jumping off in all these different directions, and we're going to try to pull it together here. It's rather, let's collectively move on child protection or on inclusion or whatever thing is impactful for our learners right now.
Right.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah. And I think these handbooks and these guides are really profound. Like you said, we are going to help the schools afterwards. I love that idea of, like, let's make it easier for the ones. So not everybody has to work as hard as I did to be able to get to this stage. I really like that. Are there any kind of changes that you've seen specifically at any schools that you feel like have been this direct consequence of the kind of different groups, organizations, handbooks that you've seen, that you've all produced in the association?
Yeah, I think when I speak to, because I meet with heads also separately and monthly, and we have heads come new into the region, and some heads, it's their first headship, or so they're very honest and open in these monthly calls that we have about challenges they're facing. And then sometimes I meet with them one-on-one, and I think they're very, the help that they get with the skill that it takes to interact with and manage sometimes their boards. They've talked about how, wow, if I had to learn that on the job, I don't think by the time I learned it, I'm not sure I would have had a job anymore, because you don't want to, it's like, you don't always want to learn on your own job, so they have so appreciated, oh my goodness, having both the community of heads there, but also resources where they can learn and apply it immediately. I mean, I did my graduate work in adult development, and this, and I think I loved focusing there because adults have this very, urgent, concrete need for the learning they're getting. It's like, I need to apply this now, both to be effective at what I do, and also probably, and also to make sure that I'm competent and people have confidence in me. So you feel that, we feel that all the time, people's real need and gratitude for, wow, I needed this like now to be able to do this well.
Yeah.
And this spans everything from governance to to, your parents are, in our case, they're tuition paying. They expect, we're not experimenting on their child to see how to do this, but they expect us to, it's high stakes in that regard. They only go through fourth grade once. They only go through fifth grade. So it's like, we really need you to know how to do this now. And so even, we have schools who've been here for 60 years and schools that are 5 years old. And so the ability of the 5-year-old school to have a 6-year-old school's learning, and here's how to, you quantum leap in terms of your ability to do things well. You kind of punch above your grade or whatever, because you have the benefit of colleagues and resources that help you know how to do it better. Of course, you always have to contextualize it, and it's your community, but you're not guessing at, I hope this is right. It's like, this works.
Becoming a better IBDP educator is a daily practice informed through reading, research, personal experience, and episodes from IB Unplugged, like the one you are listening to right now. But sometimes the show can go a bit too quickly, or we can simply forget some of the key points once we are out of the car or back from our walk and in the office preparing for our next lesson. That's why it's easy to download the episode summary at cognity.com/IB Unplugged. Simply navigate to today's episode and click Free Summary to receive a condensed summary of today's episode, including links to other sources and other exciting bits of information you can use immediately in your daily practice. It's free and it helps. Now, back to the show. But that brings us really nicely to our next part, because I know associations have a lot of power within education in terms of what we can do, and of course you're building strong community. But there's also the professional learning piece of that too. That individuals can actually learn really well in terms of how they can do their job better in their specific context. So let's talk about why that locally grounded professional learning is so important, and how yes, we're kind of working as a community, but I guess it's more that piece of now that I bring that into my context here, how do I make the most out of it?
Yeah, and again, that's also why I love being part of an association. That the fact that we are regional is very important. I think because often our schools are members of other associations. Like they'll be, for example, we'll have a British school that's a member of, say, COBIS, which is Council of British International Schools globally, right? So they'll go to that, but they will say the difference, because people say, well, why are you members of both? Isn't that redundant? And they'll say, well, no, we're members of AISA because COBIS, we go and it's, our British colleagues around the world, but there are our colleagues who are in Africa, even if they're not a British school, but they know the realities of building a school that has global excellence with the local realities. They know, there's a link. You'll start a sentence and other heads oh my God, I know exactly. We've gone through that. This is how we handled it. And you hear that all the time on our calls, and people are, and these are issues that don't happen in other regions, but you've got those colleagues who understand the local context, and you can talk about, again, you can get the best professional learning in the world, the best teacher training, but really the rubber meets the road, when you're thinking about, okay, how does this work in my local context? And that's what the associations enable, are those conversations.
Yeah, I think that the context has such a big element there. And I think for AISA, it's got to be one of the largest associations geographically. I mean, we say a local context, but then it's also a regional context. How do you balance an entire continent while also keeping a relevant context for kind of each individual school in different countries? That's a difficult balance to maintain with such a wide geographic.
Yeah, and it is. And it's so diverse. You're right. That whole thing, there's more diversity within groups than across groups sometimes. And Africa, I appreciate you just reminding us, we don't paint it with a broad brush. There's so much diversity even within a country and across countries and then regions. And we have, so one of the things we try to do is, even starting with our board composition, being attentive to that balance. Are we balancing our small schools with our large schools? Do we have representation? Do we have, what's unique to our West African as opposed to our Sub-Saharan and our, East African? I, as director, consume more news than I have about what's happening in Africa. So the reality, the geopolitical reality different heads are facing, so that something's happening in their country that erupts a water shortage or a political tension, I'm calling them. I don't have the answers, but I know this is going on in your country. How's it impacting the school? How's it impacting? So just, being there. And actually our heads are amazing at doing this for one another. I often get, an email that goes, just so you know, this school, because sometimes I don't know even within a country, within that county, something that's happening, but they're always good at going, they reach out to their colleague and then they reach out to me. So, and so then I can reach out and I let others know because they, other head might have been through, they might not be in your county, in your country, but they've been through something quite similar. So just heads up anyone. So it allows us to be there for one another, even while we acknowledge that diversity. Yeah.
You can see then why people in those regions would have very contextually specific space where they're trying to develop and they're trying to learn and grow as their own educator and apply what's happening in their region. And I guess when I think about workshops, I'm a workshop leader as well. And so you kind of go to these things and it's this sort of one-off bit and this person comes and is a part of it. And you mentioned the practice and that sort of thing that the members get to kind of work through together through all that. How do we kind of encourage those individual educators to take a lot more ownership over their professional development, be involved with the different communities, essentially reaching out to grasp all these beautiful things that you've been talking about with regard to the association?
Yeah, that whole you can lead the horse to the water, but you can't really how do you know? One of the things we and I am trying to really help educators in our region understand is that you also are, it's kind of that responsibility also to the community you are not just a consumer of learning. We need to know what happened when you took the learning, it went through your system, your practice, your experience, your classroom, and what comes out the other end. We want that, that's gold. And so we're trying to create ways to help educators who have incredible practical experience and insight to have the courage and confidence to see themselves as someone who can, support the professional learning of others and create ways. We're creating ways now that if you think you have something to share and it's just come to us, we'll help you with the whole, some of the pieces about adult development and adult training that are different from teaching students. We'll help you, and we have formal ways that we can help you and give you feedback even before you go to our conference. But our conferences have shifted where, they maybe were 80% external experts, 20% local to 50. Now it's, 50-50 and shifting in the other direction because, they're the most powerful. They've taken in, and at this point, people have had really high quality, professional learning from people we consider kind of the global standards in different areas, whether it's, tiered learning or, standards-based grading or, good governance practices. We've brought in the best. So people have had that. Now we're like, so now show us what that looks like when you applied it. And you are now, see yourself as someone who's now in a position to teach and train those coming along. And I think that motivates people also. Because then they're not just like, oh, okay, I go and I consume. I'm just,
somebody else tells me more of what I should be doing now.
Yeah.
And, those voices, because I sit in on these sessions and I'm so blown away. I do think, when practitioners step into that space, it's powerful.
And empowering people to feel like it doesn't take 20, 30 years of teaching experience to have a voice that's worth sharing in a workshop. When I think about my professional development that I've done, some of my very favorite workshops have been ones where the leader comes with so much humility of I've been doing this only for X amount of years and I just went through this really hard thing and I'm just here to share what I did and also learn what you've done, because I think there's also the dynamic shifts with the people who attend, because it also means that there isn't such a power imbalance between the leader and the people at the table. Suddenly they're like, it's not just empowering the voice of the workshop leader, it's empowering the voices of everybody else in the room too, because it's not just you're the sage and the person with all the wisdom that's imparting it on us. It's creating such a more balanced power structure between everybody in the room that I always think those are some of the best workshops.
Yes, I agree 100%.
And it lends itself right back to what you said earlier about we're all leaders, right? Regardless of what level you're at. So why not grow your leadership? Why not grow your abilities there?
Together. And that to me is one of the most exciting things about being in my role and in the association is there's the richness of learning and the potential we have to contribute back to the field of education. I just think our research knowledge base in education, just like any other industry, is constantly growing. And it's fed, though, by two sources. One is like research, people who are off in the education ivy towers and are doing actually controlled research studies and then, but also practitioner experiences, and those two are, and actually often it is someone out there doing research and then they ask a teacher or school if they can come use their school as a case study to test out their theory. And then they, and so they test out then, and then they put a name on it. They'll call it, okay, this is differentiation, or these are manipulatives. But I always remind practitioners that it began, they didn't do that. And they got that from watching some incredible educator doing this that was like, sure, you can watch me. I'm just trying to do this well. And they're like, it's brilliant. We will call this. But so all our research knowledge base comes from practitioners. And so whenever you have teachers and practitioners and leaders, you've got this rich, resource of understanding and insight to improve the profession. So it's up to us, I think, as associations to capture that and create channels for that to come out and serve the broader community.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about like what associations can actually be doing, how regardless of what role you're playing at your school, you can contribute to the community, you can contribute your ideas and your research, that sort of stuff, and make it really good. And at the same time, leaders have a very important position in their schools. They have an important role to really cultivate that idea of like, this is shared community. This is shared understanding of we can all get better. So I'm wondering, what role do you see leaders playing in fostering that culture of collaboration, that culture of learning together?
Yeah, wonderful question, because I think when you think of education training and our principal training and head of school training, often it is focused on, the concrete elements of a school enrollment management and, hiring and recruiting and all those elements. And I'm not sure being a steward and builder of culture is named as explicitly as just as important as all those other kind of technical elements. But as we know, that is critical. It's kind of, you are as the leader responsible for creating this culture, the thing you can't maybe touch and see, but it's so real. And it's this, you're modeling and also asking people to step up to a way in which we interact that honors the expertise in each of us and that acknowledges that this work is too important and complex for anyone not to show up 100%. We need 100% of you. That's why we hired you. We need 100% of you. You're not, and as a leader, there's that quote about like a leader is, measured by how they cultivate and bring out, the leaders and others, or how many leaders they create, that kind of thing. And, or about the best leaders, the people say we did it ourselves, that whole thing. So I think that creating that culture of, I happen to be wearing this title head of school, but I am, my job is to make sure all of the, leadership in you is not wasted, or is not unseen or unactivated, because we need it. And I think that we hear it all the time, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that's such an important thing to come back to, because a leader thinks of themselves as, board hired me, the school has a strategy, I'm moving us towards it, whether it's fiscal or curricular, but being inattentive to how people are doing, how they're feeling, how empowered they feel, how heard they feel is, will sabotage whatever else you're trying to do, right? So we have a school head summit every year. It's coming up actually in May, and we rotate which region or city we do it in. So it's in Zimbabwe this year. And one of the things I'm really excited about, we have a head in our association who's coming to talk about this idea of relational vigilance as a critical leadership, being vigilant and attentive to the quality of the relationships that you're having with your leadership team for sure, but with the whole school, how and measuring your success by the health of your relationships. How comfortable do people feel talking to you? How much do they believe that when they're talking to you, you're really listening, and that you can be influenced and changed by what you're listening to? Yeah. All those ways that, just like the students, they have that, what do we call it? Like the BS radar. You can this can be coming out of your mouth, but they're watching for incongruence between what you're saying and who you are. Yeah. And so that becomes it's the exact same principle on a leadership level. Your faculty, your staff, they're watching. You can have, it's not a political role where you're just saying the things. How you are, who you are, what you're modeling is really where the truth sits. So it's really important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And I think that's such a great
perspective on it. And I think that's coming from the head, and the head is thinking about what are the ways, like that's going to then lead to empowerment of other people. If they feel like they can speak up and they can create change, then it's worth thinking about your own development or the development of your school a lot more if you feel like something could come of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one element. What else do you think is kind of core for creating a culture in a school where the teachers want to grow professionally and really want to be taking that active role in shaping the strategy that the school's created?
Well, I think as leaders, you're, one, you recruited these people, they bring something unique that your school needed. And so not forgetting that once they're in the door, it's like, going back and looking for ways in which that person can lead in something the school needs, inviting their voice. It's not just faculty meeting as usual, saying, head saying something, assistant head, It's like, well, this week, we're going to hear from, so making their expertise visible in a very structured, intentional way, so that they're presenting, they're teaching us in some way, we're learning from them. Also inviting them, hey, there's an upcoming, so for example, AISA has all these events, and there's some heads that are really good. They'll call me and be like, I have teachers that I want presenting in this. Like, I know they might not have the thing, they need this push, but they can do it. So then we'll be like, thank you for telling us, like they're good. So then we'll follow up and go, hey, your head said, you got it. Your expertise got, spotlighted there. So and what that does when they, feel seen in that way, and that, wow, my head recommended me to you and said that I had something that the whole, broader community can hear from. So I think, back to your question, inviting them both in just school-wide events and meetings to lead, but also then bringing them onto the broader stage of our educational community and saying, hey, you have something to offer it. And then also, maybe creating a culture also where faculty are able to highlight, wow, this person in a conversation, or I sat on their class and it unlocked something for me professionally. It helped me serve my students better. Yeah. Creating a culture where that's done and talked about and shared, I think, is really powerful too. To say you're not just here to teach your students, you're here to teach your peers, and creating ways for people to talk about when and how that's happening.
Elizabeth, this has been so good. You can tell how important it is to be part of these associations and to really build that community more, because it's not just the resilience aspect that we spoke about at the beginning here, where, schools can kind of weather the storms better together, but there's also these professional development opportunities and ways that really people can become better all together. I'm reminded of why we are talking right now. It's because we're at this conference that's focused on Ubuntu, and this idea of like community really brings us together and allows us to be better. Education is not an isolated thing, like we said at the start. And so you can really see all the ways that you're talking about this, from the leadership part, from building community, from working together as associations, that really you end up creating the best things possible for students in the classroom. Yeah. And then that's our goal, right? We're able to really get better as educators, and then we can bring more powerful things to our students.
Absolutely. I'm so proud of our profession. I'm so grateful for you all for even creating space for this conversation, because these are things I carry around in me, but then to get a chance to say them again, I'm leaving here even filled with more gratitude and pride, and just and humility to think about all that we have the privilege of doing and making happen, and the responsibility we have to kind of create the conditions so that is not wasted and that actually happens. Your remark just made me, I'll get this quote in because it's one of my favorites. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we say that all the time within AISA, but it's not just this smart. It really is why we, there are things that might take more time because collaborating takes more time. Yeah. But what you get is so much better than what you would have had if you tried to go it alone as a school, tried to go it alone as a educator or as a leader. So I just, that togetherness, I think is such a predictor of how we can do this sustainably and for the long term.
Elizabeth, you're awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Likewise. Oh my goodness, what a great opportunity. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Cool.
IB Unplugged is a Cognigy podcast hosted by John Patton and Courtney Marlene and produced by Catalina Gaffney. Be sure to subscribe or follow and share with your fellow IB educators. If you'd like to submit a topic, request, or question, please do so on cognity.com/IBUnplugged. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other in teaching with confidence, creativity, and joy. See you next time.